Cool. Right. Well, hello. Welcome back to the greyest channel on YouTube, but slightly made more colorful for two reasons. First of all, I have a nice blue book that I could try and stick here to make like an impromptu bookshelf. Just cuddling it for a second. I won't do that. Also, because I'm joined by two wonderful people. So first of all, I'm joined by Tori Tekken, author of, among other things, Cold Silver for Souls, which we're going to talk about today. Hi, Tori.
Hello. So you want me to introduce myself? Hello.
Go for it. Yeah, I left that very nebulous, didn't I? Hope you go.
Yeah, I didn't want to step on any toes. Yeah, hi, I'm Tori. I am a author. I've been published since I was 14, and I have Cold Silver is my 13th book now. It was kind of just hey, I want to try writing a fantasy Western, and what if the main character was a necromancer? And that's kind of how it started. So, yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to talk about it.
Did you say 14 books?
13.
13. Okay, sorry. I overshot a little bit.
Not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Next year.
That's impressive.
And hi, Joanna. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm Joanna from Joanna Reads. I'm doing great. I'm really excited to talk about this book. This was my first experience reading Tori's writing, and there's so many positive things I have to say about it. And I'm also I was happy with the setting, I have to say, because my family actually has property in a ghost town that was an old mining village. And then also there happens to be a Silver City, New Mexico, where one of my friends lives. So I'm actually kind of familiar with this type of setting. And I felt like that it was extremely well described, even though it was fantasy, clearly, and it was created, but it still was so evocative for me of that type of experience I've had in that type of setting in real life. So excited to talk about it.
So I'm the opposite, not opposite in the sense of I didn't enjoy the book. I did. I'm opposite in the sense of I grew up in Scotland where we have sheep and grass and there's not a grain of sand to be found. So I think we're going to have a really interesting discussion. What I'm going to do is vaguely kind of barricade this conversation into two parts. We'll do spoiler free for, I reckon, what, guys, 20, 25 minutes? And then we can move to spoilers for 30, 35 minutes. Because Joanna and I have a burning question, a mutual burning question that we're going to get to. But we have to, Joanna, do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay,
Yes.
we'll save that
How
for the
scared should I be?
I think so. I think I know what you're talking
not
about.
particularly
Hopefully
scared.
I'm right.
No. But Joanna, I want to throw it to you first of all. And I know you've done this a little bit already, but kind of give us your impressions of Cold Silver for Souls and any topics that sort of came up as you were going through this reading experience.
Sure. Yeah. So I think what I'll say is Cold Silver for Souls was a fun indie self-published fantasy book that takes place in a mining town of Silver City, and we follow a necromancer character named Hunter. And I think one thing that's really special about this book is the way that Hunter herself, she seems to be an outcast. She doesn't seem to be well regarded among the people in Silver City, or the people just don't, they think she's kind of strange because, well, she's lugging around a corpse. She happens to be a necromancer. So there's necromancy magic in this story. And it doesn't get quite, there's a lot that is not quite explained about it, but we're getting hints about how that works. And the thing I found really interesting too about the journey, as we are going through sort of Hunter's experiences as a bounty hunter and some people she meets along the way, including a person named Johnny, is the way that the people who know her, the people who really know her, care about her and they see the good in her. And you get to know that even though she's taken up bounty hunting as her profession, she has a moral code. And so this is something that I think is highly explored in this story, is about a moral code and about letter of the law versus spirit of the law, and about whether the people who are doling out justice, whether they are in the right to do so or how they're being incentivized. I think that's brought up here and there as well. And I also just appreciated that the character of Hunter seemed to develop more and more as the story goes on. As I said in my own review, I felt like a little bit distanced. Yeah, I felt distanced from Hunter at the beginning, even though I thought that the setting descriptions were beautiful. And it wasn't until we start to get to know her more through some of the friend characters that we meet. So we have a character named Ambrose, who's a reverend. We have a character named Johnny that she meets, and I won't go into too much spoilers about that. We have a woman who's a hotel owner named Addie, and a couple of other friends who happen to be inspired by booktubers, which we could talk about later
Mhm.
on. But whenever we get to know her through these characters, I feel like we start to see more of her vulnerable side. I think that that's the beautiful thing too, and the wonderful thing that I appreciate when it comes to friendship as it's depicted in a fantasy book is that sometimes I feel like when people try to depict friendship in a fantasy book, it's like, oh, we just are always getting along and everything's all hunky dory. And that's not the case here. Like, there are certainly beautiful moments of connection, but you see Hunter make mistakes and you see her expose there are sides of her that she doesn't want to see that her friends see, but gently pull out of her. And so I thought that that was one of the things I greatly appreciated about the story, in addition to several other things. But I'll just stop there because I'm rambling.
Can I just jump in and add to that? Because what I've done, as every good booktuber does, is I've blatantly plagiarized. Because I've one of the things I did today, as I was kind of preparing for this, was I just looked at a few different comments from a few different friends all the way down, and I noticed that Derry, from Derry's Read It Before, gave a review that said that Hunter is an authentic character who isn't male coded, and there was lots of talk from Derry about her enjoyment of Hunter. And similar, Esme from Grimdark Magazine talks about kind of unpeeling the layers of Hunter. And it seems as though, Joanna, there's a lot of kind of resonance with just those two examples with what you're saying. So, Tori, if I could pass it to you, like, where did the character of Hunter come from? And how did you go about constructing her as you wanted her to be on the page?
So it was really funny because I had always said that I didn't think I would ever write a first-person narrative. And I since then have realized that I just hadn't found the right character yet. Because to me, a first-person narrative, there has to be a very specific, very unique voice to make it really engaging. I'm not the type of person that typically enjoys a kind of like Mary Sue, we're just gonna like have the reader jump into this character and it could be anybody kind of feel. So Hunter, when I started writing, my goal was I want to start to channel a little bit of my kind of rural Midwestern upbringing into this character. And there's a lot of things from the area that Hunter is from that are very like kind of caricatured, of course, bits and pieces of that upbringing and people that I knew and like the good, the bad, and the, you know, the ugly, all kind of thrown in together. And it's not specific people I knew, I should say. But I also think for me, Hunter was an exploration of kind of a metaphoric representation of holding on to things that are hurting you more than anyone else. And that kind of idea of hanging on to trauma or grief or anger, especially at someone else, and how that can just kind of wall you off and poison you as you're going through your life, and how it can keep you from really experiencing life to the fullest and relationships to the fullest. So I wanted Hunter and Rip kind of came as a package deal from day one. And I knew that I wanted Rip to feel the corpse to feel like a ball and chain through the whole book. That, you know, Hunter is dragging this thing that she cannot let go of, and exploring what that does and how that affects your relationships and your life and your choices, and, you know, how that dampens your spirit almost. So that was kind of the catalyst into her character, and then she just kind of took on a life of her own after that, and she started, there was a sassiness about her that I really enjoyed writing, that kind of grit despite everything, which is something I always love reading in characters. So yeah, that was kind of her genesis, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. I had never thought before about that, about how Rip is symbolic, is what you're saying. Rip is symbolic of the repression and the attachment, and that there's a interesting symbiotic relationship there, right? Between trauma being something that we can't let go of, and it's something we don't want to look at.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And
that's
also,
really interesting.
Rip. By the way, I was only looking through it today. I'm like, oh, Rip, R.I.P. Should have picked that
Yeah.
up like 20 pages in. Yeah, it took me a second read to work that one out, and that's the
That
genius
one was
of
my
it.
little bit of a on the
Yeah.
nose. Yeah.
But Rip is basically indestructible to anyone except
Yeah.
Hunter. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't want to go into certain scenes, but it's
Yeah.
only Hunter herself who can actually kind of cast off. I think the word that is used repeatedly is tether. The only person who can untether herself from Rip is Hunter.
Hunter.
So there is a kind of self-destructive element to it as well, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. Well, and I mean, we can go into this too a little bit. Necromancy is a type of magic that I've always been fascinated by how people use it in storytelling. And I knew that I wanted to kind of go a little bit of a different way from the really like grotesque, like kind of zombie-esque. I mean, Rip is technically sort of a zombie, but I wanted it to be more of a, what are the costs of something to the magician, and how can I use that as a more symbolic, like what does that look like as a symbol, and what could that represent, and kind of digging into it that way a little bit more, which was really fun, and I'm excited to explore it further in the series. So yeah.
It is interesting, by the way, kind of going back to that idea of it. Whereas, it is more common to read a Western that is from like a male perspective. I think that's why when I started this, I immediately thought, I think I messaged you right away and I said, have you read True Grit? Because I think that immediately came into my mind.
I
But
have now.
Yeah, and you have now. Yeah, yeah. And I think one thing that's interesting though to me about her character, about Hunter's character though, is that even though she is a female character, there are masculine aspects of her. So, like for example, her name is Hunter, and I would assume that would be a male character. She doesn't really like to wear women's clothing. She's more like a tomboy. And I get the impression that she was very close to her father as well, which we know that her parents passed away before the story begins. Her mother, I'm assuming from tuberculosis, although it's
something similar. Yeah.
something similar to that. And that and I think that was something that I really appreciated also about Hunter and her characterization that comes through, is that she is constantly thinking about things Ma said or that her father said, and there are constantly little quotes and echoes of her parents going through her mind whenever she's making decisions, and I thought that was beautifully handled too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And also, there's echoes of that in the setting too. I mean, a lot of the places that Hunter is visiting are places. There's not much new territory covered really from Hunter's perspective. If there is, they're mostly locales that she has already been to. So again, if we're talking about kind of the past and echoes and memory, there's a sense in which maybe you're setting foot in places that have great significance to you already. In fact, would you mind if we talk about the world a little bit?
Go for it.
This is something Joanna and I have been discussing, and so Western fantasy setting. But what struck us both as quite, if you don't mind me saying this, Joanna, quite interesting, is that there's quite a lot of significant, I would say, maybe real world elements in there as well. And one of the main ones is maybe the religious structures. I mean, it seems as though there's a church, as we would associate maybe with a Christian church, kind of in this world. And so I'm trying to create a question out of this general.
Doing great.
I think you're doing great.
When you're constructing a world. Oh, sorry, Joanna, on you go.
Oh, I was saying, I think there are crosses too.
Hunter has a silver cross. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're going about your world building, I mean, how conscious is it that the intentionality behind bringing in these real world elements alongside a fantasy setting?
Yeah, I think like anything, I mean, in my opinion, every author, like reading their work gives you a glimpse into them as a person in some way. And some of the religious themes in Cold Silver were things that I wanted to explore from my own experiences. And I wanted to look at, that wrestle, because I think a lot of times there's either like in a lot of novels, you have characters who are completely against religion or characters who are completely devout. And I wanted to play with something in the middle where Hunter, she believes, but there's a lot of doubt because of things that she's experienced, and she's really having a hard time like grappling with some of these religious things that like Reverend Ambrose very devoutly believes. And so he's a very positive figure in her life, but she's trying to make sense of it for herself. And I think that kind of a struggle is something that is very underexplored in a lot of fantasy in general, but just fiction. I really liked trying to dig into that a little bit, and that in some ways reflects even my own like faith journey through the years, and trying to wrestle with and figure things out, and having that like having those hard conversations with God about like, well, why and what and how does this make, you know, and all that kind of confusing like ups and downs of being a person of faith. And so I think with Hunter, it was just kind of a natural, since there was a lot of my background and growing up in the setting anyways, that just kind of naturally worked its way in.
I think you're really right about a lot of fantasy and literature in general, to be honest, being so binary in the representation, not even of religion necessarily, but of faith. And faith is either dogmatism leading to destruction or emancipatory. And there's no middle ground. There's very rarely a character that is sincerely questioning and kind of interrogating their own belief system. It feels like so much of that happens off page. So yeah. So I totally vibe with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, and it also kind of, oh, sorry, Joanna.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's well said.
I think too, it leads into a discussion of worthiness. And, you know, Hunter makes several comments through the story, and this isn't really a spoiler, but she struggles with like she sees Reverend Ambrose and she puts him on a pedestal, obviously. And so in her mind, well, like obviously he's the better example. I'm not really worthy to have the kind of faith that he has, and she's kind of like doing that ranking sort of thing in her own mind, and she's removing her ability to be loved by anyone. Like it's not just a religious thing, and you see that with the other characters in the book too. There's that question of worthiness. Well, like I'm too far past that in her head. She's kind of at that point, I think.
Yeah, and I also noticed there was another religion that was brought up in the world too. I'm gonna try to say this. Marinescence, is that how you say it?
Yep.
Marinescence. Yeah, and I also thought it was interesting too, because even though there's another religion, I don't think it's common that we see multiple religions that aren't pitted against each other. And I think that was not necessarily the case. It didn't feel like Hunter was judgmental of either one.
Yeah,
that was the impression I got. But it was a very different way of life. Were those inspired by anything in our world, or?
I mean, subconsciously, yeah, definitely. But I think I was kind of cherry picking bits and pieces, and I was looking, I really try to dig into the world, and I try to say, okay, what types of people would have come to the territories? And, you know, we have the people that are here because their home country is struggling and they want to expand and try to get, you know, that more resources to kind of burgeon the economy and all this sort of stuff. And then you have the people that are adventure seekers, and then you have this group that's trying to set up their own way of life and their own religious freedom in a space that's completely untouched for the most part by other groups at this point. And so that's kind of where the Marinescence came in, where I was like, okay, they're this kind of like pioneer group who's trying to set up like their own holy city, essentially. And what would that look like if it was very strict, and they're very kind towards others, but they also have a very strict set of rules about what they can and cannot do and all this kind of stuff. So it was kind of, you know, bits and pieces, I'm sure, could be pointed to different aspects of our own world, but I think I was really trying to filter in what does this look like in the world that I'm creating, and how would that naturally occur.
I find this conversation so interesting. Having lived in a few countries with a few different faith systems, I do think there's often a greater need for complexity. I mean, sorry, forgive me, I can't remember who quite said it, but the idea that even just two faith systems can interact without necessarily bashing each other,
exactly,
is not very prevalent. And I love that this is all taking place in the novel in the shadow of something called the cathedrals as well, which I don't know.
I
Yeah.
love, by the way, that name description, the cathedrals. I
Thank
thought that
you.
was clever.
The cathedrals with the mountains is just, I've always felt closest to God in nature.
Mm.
And the amazing, just like standing in the shadow of something like the Grand Tetons out west of the mountains and just being just in awe of like how massive they are and how small you feel. And like,
Yeah.
so I kind of wanted to give that kind of vibe when I was figuring out how I wanted the world set up.
One thing that Joanna and I both I think, Joanna, you brought it to my attention first, is the idea that while this novel is not necessarily contingent upon YouTube and booktube, there are very much elements of booktube kind of spliced in. So there are characters who are, what can we say, maybe homages or named after certain other booktubers, for one. And I found that this was really interesting, and there's a connection between your booktube life and your writing life, and you're perfectly happy to kind of wear that on your sleeve.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could maybe speak to that a little bit, that the idea that you wanted to kind of have some elements of booktube in your book, and what is it about your time on booktube that maybe went into the writing of Cold Silver for Souls?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I've been on booktube for 5.5 years now. Well, 6 years in January, and I've been incredibly grateful for what I've learned and the relationships that I've been able to build here, and just the support, because I didn't really have a community when I came back to writing in 2020 and wrote phased and was trying to kind of figure out how to find my footing. And then when I started building the community on booktube, it was like all of a sudden my readership had this bright new life in it, and I was suddenly writing for someone again, which was something that I hadn't experienced since I was much younger. And, you know, outside of my typical group of family and friends that are always extremely supportive and want to read everything I write and that sort of thing, moving past that, booktube has just, I'm very motivated by the idea of people reading what I've written, I think, as most authors are, and the idea that other people get to connect with these characters in the story that I'm telling. And that's such a rewarding thing as a writer. So knowing that I have this amazing community right outside my door, metaphorically, that are excited, and I'm getting feedback, and there's, you know, people talking about it in videos that I can watch, and it's a really encouraging space to be a writer in. And in terms of the booktubers who are included in Cold Silver as little cameos, and I won't say who it is, but we can talk about the spoilers if you want. It was, I think, there's always the joke, right? Like, be careful what you say to an author. You might find yourself in one of their books, like in kind of a negative way. Like, be careful what you say, I'll eviscerate you in fiction. There's, you know, all these kinds of quotes. And, you know, I'm with some of the villains in my books, they're definitely like bits and pieces of experiences I've had through the years, for sure. But I was like, well, yeah, but let's do that in a fun way. like, you know, and it was with two people that I knew would appreciate having those cameos in the book, and people that have been some of my oldest friends here on booktube. And it was so much fun. And I asked them some questions as I was writing to kind of get, you know, the authenticity a bit better. And we're one of the things that I will probably announce a little bit later, but I can kind of tease here, is that I'm looking at doing a full cast audiobook for this story. And the two people in question have agreed to voice their own characters, which I'm very excited about. So yeah, it's going to be awesome. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of a little homage as a sort of thank you to them for all their support, and also just to booktube in general, because yeah, I owe a lot to this community.
That's so neat. And I do wonder about that, because I feel like I think David and I have had this conversation recently too, is some of when you start your channel, for some of us, maybe not David, for example, but for some of us, I feel like it takes us time to establish and to find our voice on booktube, and
Definitely.
like find out who we are. And I do wonder about that, because obviously you have found your voice as a writer after so many years of writing.
Yeah.
And if that process, if you feel like those are interconnected, like my voice as a writer feels like it's one with my voice as a booktuber, or if they feel like totally different domains.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a weird question to ask.
No,
Or
I
love
don't
that
think
question.
so. Yeah, no, I don't think so at all. I mean, I've worked really hard, and one of the things that I've promised my audience on BookTube is I'm as transparent as I possibly can be in a parasocial internet relationship, right? And I take that very seriously, and that authenticity is something that is very valuable to me, and I think to them too. And I try to do that with my writing too. I don't hold back. It's my writing's very emotions driven. I'm a very emotional writer. My best writing happens at like 2 a.m. when I'm just delirious and all the emotions are right at the surface. And like, but yeah, I mean, I think there's some things obviously that I feel safer exploring in fantasy because there's, like Philip Chase and I have talked about that kind of psychic barrier where you can explore things in a less confrontational way in fantasy oftentimes, which is a really beautiful thing about the genre. But yeah, I mean, I think definitely BookTube has offered me opportunities I would not have had outside of that. And that means a lot to me. And I don't know if that really answers your question.
Yeah, no, yeah,
But
it's interesting too, because I know you've said before that on your channel that, and I would not describe this as a political book by any means, but I just thought it was
sure.
interesting because I know you mentioned on your channel that this is like a safe place where I don't want to talk about
Yeah.
politics because we get
Yeah.
enough of that outside of BookTube.
Definitely.
And
Yep.
and yet, fantasy is full of politics, and I'm sure
Yeah.
that you
Mm.
have explored it in some of your books too. I mean, there's a little bit in here.
Definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think for me, it goes deeper than I typically do not address like specific, like present day situations. I'm more looking at things from like like in general history, like moral questions, that sort of stuff is more what I'm interested in. And I think with the books that I write, what I find really interesting and something that I really appreciate is I see people resonating with what I'm saying from very different viewpoints oftentimes. And I love that because one of the things that I really try to talk about a lot and walk that walk myself is I'm more interested in unity than division. And I think it's really interesting how two people with polar opposite viewpoints might find common ground in the same kind of moral questions and the same kind of exploration of humanity in books. And I love that. I love that so much.
I
So
love that
interesting.
too. Yeah. Yeah.
First of all, if you want to just take 20 minutes and lay out all your political opinions, now's the time.
I don't have a BookTube channel tomorrow.
That is so funny.
But what you just said is what I actually have written down in the doc next to me, is that I really felt like coming up in this text a lot are the themes of kind of rejection and community both, where, as Hunter, and again, we can transition to spoilers in a minute, but as Hunter is traveling around, there is this question of both acceptance by individuals, acceptance by communities, rejection by communities, and trying to kind of work that out in the world she exists in. So what exactly you were saying was coming up in my mind as you were speaking. So, yeah.
I think it's an important conversation to have. And I think people are way more alike than they give each other credit for. And that's something that I see in conversations a lot that I wish we would focus on more as a society in general. So, yeah.
Does anyone have any further things to ask before we move into spoilers?
I want to ask a question. You don't have to say why for spoilers, but I always like to know which character specifically within the story outside of Hunter resonated with you guys the most.
Okay, I think I don't know. Okay, this is a hard question to answer, but I'm gonna go with Johnny, only because I felt like Johnny just he had a certain authenticity to his voice that I can't describe. Like I felt like there was a realistic conflict in him, a realistic fear, and I just love the interaction between him and Hunter, and I felt like he was the one specifically, I think, that brought out things that she was most uncomfortable to see. I think we could say the same thing about Addie as well, but
Mhm.
there was something very specific about Johnny and what he represents. He represents something to Hunter, and
Yeah.
I'm not even totally 100% clear what he's representing, if it's her
Can't wait
past
to
or
talk about it.
innocence. But yeah, but there are certain there's something in that relationship that that was when I was like, I am hooked. Like there is something here that I think is really worth exploring and interesting. And there's a lot of spoiler things to say about Johnny,
Yep,
but
can't
yeah,
wait.
I think that would be my choice.
Awesome.
Mhm.
So I was going to say Hunter, and then you took that away from me.
Sorry.
Okay. And you know what? For a minute, I was also going to say Rip, not in terms of Rip as a character, but I find that Hunter and Rip's interactions, without giving anything away, there are moments in the novel of confrontation, which I found very interesting and intriguing, and we'll get to that. But I think I'm going to land. I think we're going to land on Addie. I say we. I don't know why I'm referring to myself in the plural, but I really enjoyed the character of Addie, and I've just my royal Britishness is coming in. I think that the way that another character has power and presence in a way that's totally different from the way that Hunter has power and presence, I find very interesting, and the friendship that is there, and also the way they kind of play off against each other. So I think my answer would probably be Addie, actually.
Excellent.
Awesome.
I want to say one more thing, spoiler free, and that is because we were talking about how we were talking about the world building and the religions and everything. And that is to say that one thing that I greatly admire about Tori as a writer is that she is somebody who does her research when it comes to the subject she's writing about. And if you want evidence of this, just watch her most recent book haul. Maybe we can link it down in the description. Because my goodness, she had so many books that made it clear that she's looking at history. She's looking at a lot of nonfiction. She's
I love it.
interested. She's really deeply interested in that. And I know that your grandfather is a huge influence on you for that as well.
Definitely.
But I did appreciate how much of this story did not feel anachronistic. Like I felt like the dialogue had a certain there were certain aspects of the dialogue and the writing that and the character voice that felt like authentic to that period, although I'm not an expert. So maybe
Sure.
I can't, I can't speak to that
I'm
as an
not either.
expert. But to me, but I felt like you did do some research on just little tiny certain phrases that you used or certain terms that you used. And so that was something that I definitely wanted to bring up, was just how much of those little touches that you added that you clearly looked into.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the Hunter's dialect is very heavily reminiscent of rural Minnesota. A lot of the things that she says, the little isms that she uses within her dialogue are things that, like, I come from a very, like, I'm 8th generation Southeast Minnesotan. So like I'm very familiar with the culture of rural Minnesota and the way that people talk. And like as a little thing, I kind of smiled because my uncle literally posted something on Facebook the other day that illustrated my dialect point perfectly. Where in my family, on my dad's side, very rural Minnesota farm family, you don't get together with people, you get to gather. And there's very specific little things that are very different than any other dialects you'll find outside of that area. And so I was really channeling a lot of that into Hunter specifically, which was fun. But other than that, like documentaries about the Yukon Gold Rush, I eat that. Like I love documentaries, and I love reading. I got to tour a gold mine when we were out in the Black Hills in September, and I can guarantee you, I was taking notes. I felt bad because I'm sure the tour guide thought I wasn't paying any attention, but I was frantically taking notes on my phone as he was talking, because I was like, oh, this is going in the next book, or like, you know. So I love that. I love being able to make the world feel lived in and real, because I think that's, even as a character first person, I think that the world is a very important cradle for those characters. So
oh, that's well said. I like that, cradle for the characters. Nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Mines, by the way, absolutely terrifying.
They are,
right?
Yeah.
Totally terrifying.
Kind of the mines in the north of England, kind of in the 20th century, George Orwell wrote a book about them. Like these guys just going down into the absolute blackness to get some fuel for the rest of us, and the amount of absolute just destruction and death that happened to these people for the sake of a fire. Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And
Terrifying.
on that note, spoilers. Shall we do it?
Spoilers.
Absolutely.
Right. Joanna, do you want to ask the question or shall I?
Go ahead.
Okay,
You can
right.
do
Oh my
it.
goodness.
Okay, Tori, talk to me, because as soon as Addie came on the page, I'm right. Okay, that's Hunter's girlfriend. That's Hunter's girlfriend. Right there.
I had the same thought. We
Yes.
both had the thought
Yeah.
independently of one another. We're like, is there a sapphic thing happening? Like, and then I was like, oh, I guess I was wrong about that. By the end of the book.
But there's even a line in the book at one point along the lines of, and I thought you two were together, something along those lines.
Oh yeah. Later on in the lynch mob, yeah.
Are we totally reading at cross purposes to intention here, or is there something under the surface?
Well, it's funny that you bring this up, because I knew writing them that this would come up. I knew that because I think it's a very natural thing when you're reading two characters that really deeply care about each other and are very comfortable with each other, that kind of would come up as a question, because clearly they're such positive influences on each other's lives and all of that in a world that can be kind of hard to find. I think for them, one of the things that I wanted to explore is the idea of, and this is going to go back to my college years, so we're going to take a little trip back. There was a professor who was listening to a English capstone presentation by a senior who was a year older than me. And she was of the opinion that really, really deep, close-knit relationships there has to be some kind of sexual tension or romance involved, period. There's nothing outside of that. And I immediately was like, hold on a second now. I don't agree with that, because I think sometimes we see really deep love as it can be one type. It has to be romantic, right? And I've had a lot of relationships in my life that I'm very grateful for, where I very, very deeply love somebody and I'm very close to them, and we're soulmates in a platonic sense. Mm-hmm. And that was what I wanted to explore with Hunter and Addie, because I think that kind of relationship is severely underrepresented in fantasy specifically, but in a general sense as well, that you can have that kind of deep, caring love for another person that isn't romantic, that doesn't have sexual tension to it. And I think that was really important for me to show also a positive, female relationship, because oftentimes girls are shown in books being very catty or hating each other and whatever. And I was like, but hold on a second. What if not? And I really wanted to explore Addie and Hunter being kind of each other's refuge from the world in a way. And Addie gets a lot of unwanted male attention because she's a very wealthy, very beautiful bachelorette, right? And Hunter's kind of her bodyguard in a way. And on the opposite side, I think Addie brings a softness to Hunter's life that is probably a void left behind by her mother, to be honest, where she's grasping for some of that in her life, and she might not enjoy wearing the satin and lace, but she knows Addie does, so she kind of gets her little fix by picking things out for Addie, right? So yeah, that was a relationship that was really important to me to showcase in a platonic sense. Yeah. But I love that everybody thinks they're really beautifully close, and I love that that's coming up. I love it.
That's so interesting about how she might represent a softness of her mother. I hadn't even put that together. That's interesting. Yeah. And I agree. I do agree with you. I'm always saying, I feel like we don't have enough celebrated female friendships in fantasy. We have so many male ones, we can talk about.
We need more sistermances.
Yeah. It drives me crazy. Honestly, I was like, I was so happy that Erickson finally gave us one in The God Is Not Willing, but I don't, and there are some, I guess, in Last Book of the Fallen, there are a couple. I guess I could say there are a couple, but I don't think they get
Yeah.
talked about nearly as much as the male ones. And so I'm all
No.
for more female friendships. Yeah.
Yep.
It's interesting. I mean, having just said that, I'm now going to bring it to kind of male friendships, because I've been mentioning that I've been reading Lord of the Rings, and that's
Yeah.
that really came out clear to me, is this idea, because the hobbits all flipping love each other to pieces, man,
Yeah.
and they
It's
they
beautiful.
articulate it, and it kind of threw me off in the beginning, because I'm like, why do these people just keep talking to each other about how dear they are to each other and how much they cherish each other? And again, these words, dear,
Yeah.
cherish, love, these words
Yeah.
feel kind of romance coded.
Very. Yeah.
And I think the reason that it sort of lurched me to one side when I was first reading Fellowship of the Ring, and also maybe why I didn't spot it quite as much in your book, is because it is quite unusual these days for
Yeah.
friends to turn to each other and just outright declare
Yeah.
appreciation. Yeah,
We need more of that, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, date your friends. Like, I'm a big believer in that. Like, having that closeness and really, I think soulmate is a word that really can apply to a lot of different relationships. Like, I see my grandfather as a soulmate in a lot of ways. I have had friends that I consider soulmates. My husband is a completely different kind of soulmate, right? Like, there's all these beautiful relationships that we as humans can experience. And I think we often kind of box them in too much to why not use those words with people that you do love and cherish without the added romantic attachment. So yeah,
because it's
I love that.
scary.
It is, well, yeah. Especially in a lot of like our kind of Western, I grew up in the Midwest. Okay. So like, we're very careful about, I'm a weird Midwesterner because I'm very expressive about my affection for people typically. And here it's very like, you want to be careful about, like, you don't want to commit too much to very strong emotions here in the Midwest. That's a thing that's kind of scary out here. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I grew up as like a big hugger. Like I'd have this group of friends and we just give each other's big hugs, long hugs. And I feel like that's not as big a thing anymore. So
Sadly, yeah.
But I do feel like I'm very naturally like an affectionate person, but
Yeah.
I feel like I've changed too because culture's changed. And so it's just
Yeah.
interesting how that's I agree with you, Tori. I think that needs to be more highly represented. And what if it was? What if it was more highly
What if it
represented
was? Yeah.
in our stories? Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
interesting.
love platonic relationships, and you see a lot of them in Cold Silver because of that, because that's something that I'm very interested in exploring too. Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of that, we should go ahead and just spoil about the two booktubers who are in the story.
Yes, let's do
Yeah.
that.
Speaking of people I love and cherish.
Yeah, I loved. Okay, so Miss K
Yes.
is clearly Kay's hidden shelf, and
Kay's hidden shelf. Yes.
yeah, and I loved, and that actually was really complimented to me. I thought that actually added also to. So this is the wonderful thing, is how the side characters add to richness to Hunter's character,
Yeah.
because the food. I mean, she was constantly like, we learned that Hunter has a big appetite, and she will never say
She
no
likes food.
to
Nope.
a big enormous meal.
She appreciates a good cook.
Yes. And so, and certainly that seems to be Kay's love language. So now I'm curious if Kay is in real life is a cook. Is there any inspiration there with that?
Definitely. It's actually kind of funny because in the deluxe box on my website, when Cold Silver came out, about 3 weeks before the book debut came out, I reached out to Kay and I said, so random thought, how would you feel about sharing a recipe with me that I can put in the deluxe box that's like a Miss Kay's? So there is a Miss Kay's bread recipe that goes out with every deluxe box of Cold Silver. And she wrote, and it's not just like make bread, it's like 2 pages of, and here's if you want to add the sourdough starter. And like, I mean, she really, it's a full recipe. And she has a series on her channel where she bakes things from books. like makes up recipes from books
Oh,
that she's read, and like it's an art form for her. And that's one of the things I told her that I wanted to showcase with Miss K, is that was her art form, that's how she shows that she cares about people, and it's this beautiful thing that she has. And it kind of fits along with Addie's magical ability, which is charm. Miss K kind of reflects that too, and so does Andrew Hayes' character, where there's kind of everybody within the hotel. I mean, even Owen, the little stable boy, he's very charming. And I wanted that to kind of be the vibe of the whole cast in that location. So that was an easy ad for Kayla to be in that specific group of characters.
yeah.
What about Andrew?
So the funny thing is, the reason why he's the bartender. So last year, Ben and I went on an anniversary trip in June in 2024 to Kentucky. And on our way out there, we actually stopped where Andrew lives and stayed overnight and had a lovely visit and talked books. And we filmed in Andrew's library, and like it was super fun. And that night we went out and sat on his patio they have like a fire ring. And Andrew was sharing with us his favorite bourbon. So we had these little glasses with a little bit of bourbon, and we were having this really deep conversation. It was really lovely. And so immediately when I was like, where am I going to put Andrew in this story? And I immediately thought back to that moment as being a really special part of our friendship. And, he is friends with Ben as well. And the three of us just sitting around this fire with our bourbon glasses. And it was just a really beautiful memory. So immediately I was like, well, he's going to be the bartender then. And that's kind of where that came from.
I laughed out loud because there's a part where I think that Hunter says something like, "You're a wizard."
You're a wizard, my friend. Yep. And it was really funny because my editor was like, "Are there wizards in this world?" And I was like, "I don't care." that line's staying in there. I don't care. Maybe.
Yeah. That's so funny. Yeah. And I loved it because he was a very jovial character, just like very bright and sunny, and like I could just see it as Andrew. I could immediately picture Andrew in that role.
Right. His last name, I realized after the fact, a lot of people were like, is this Rob Hayes? Because the last name is Andrew Hayes. And I was like, no, it's not Rob. Sorry, guys. But Drew Hayes is one of Andrew Wizard's favorite indie authors. So I just pulled his favorite author's last name and added it to his.
Oh, that's how that works. Because I thought Robert Hayes too, or Rob Hayes. Yeah.
I didn't think about that till after the book came out. And then I was like, oh, I suppose that would be confusing. Yes.
Got it. Yeah.
Rob is also great.
Because I know you've talked about that book, like Never Die. Is that the same author? Right? Yeah.
Yep.
I know. Yeah.
It's a great book.
Love it.
I was going to talk about and I wonder if you would agree with this or not, Tori, the kind of the slightly episodic feel of Cult of Souls. That it definitely feels like a novel that's kind of broken up into chunks. You've got the chunk in the cathedrals, you've got the chunk where Hunter is going down and doing this mission for McBride, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it feels like a novel that kind of is building these steps until you get to that final sort of 40, 50 pages where it comes together and all these pieces suddenly cohere. And it's as an approach to writing a book, I found it very interesting. And I was wondering about how it was writing, kind of almost like a series of episodes, if you like. And if any of these episodes were particularly more challenging to write, or if any of them were a bit more grueling to try and get right on the page.
And before she answers that, I just want to go ahead and say that it's funny because I had that thought too when I was reading. I'm like, this feels episodic, but not in a bad way. But what you don't know, Tori, probably is that David and I were on the Book Street Boy podcast a few weeks ago, and there's a soapbox part of the podcast where you get on your soapbox and you say something that's been on your mind. And David happened to say I was one of his million soapbox rants. He had like 5. But he said that we need to get rid of this idea that episodic is a bad thing. So just FYI.
I love episodic. I love right. Freeze. We've just suddenly decided that this word is a negative word. Why? Like the TV shows we watch are episodic, and that's fine. Like stuff was serialized. Charles Dickens stuff is episodic because that's how he wrote it.
Manga is episodic.
Why? Why do we suddenly use the word episodic and have it charged with negative connotations when all it means is that the story is broken into discrete chunks that cohere at the end? So, right, listen, it's midnight over here. I've probably woken my children up, but I needed to get this rant out one more time because, I love episode. Thank you, Joanna, for salving the negative connotations of that word slightly, because in my mind there are no negative connotations to the word episodic, and I love seeing it on the page. Soapbox over.
Love it. Beautiful. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, so previous to Cold Silver, I was writing my Bloodstones book, and it's a very epic, very, complex kind of writing style, not episodic. And Cold Silver 2024 I've said this in other interviews too, 2024 was a really rough year for me personally, and I didn't have the brain space that I needed to write what the Legends of the Brew High requires. And I needed something that was episodic, that was a little bit, shorter bits that I could put together, and one, singular narrative character, and a little bit snappier, faster, shorter, and it's very reminiscent of the older style Western, like the Zane Greys and the Louis L'Amour kind of series, from the mid to 3/4 1900s, and that was, and also I love Western films, so this book is very reminiscent of some of my favorite Western films. And it was really fun. It was so much fun to write, you guys. I had a blast. There were some very difficult moments that took a lot out of me emotionally. Obviously the lynch mob scene at the end was very grueling emotionally to write. I was pouring a lot into that, and that one took me several days to kind of work through and just do a little bit at a time, and just kind of give myself the grace to put it down and walk away for a bit. I'm trying to think what else. The party at Addie's hotel was another one that there were a lot of like moving pieces and a lot of things. So that one was a little bit harder to make sure, okay, what do I want to show here, and what kind of characters do I want to have like sprinkled in, like the mayor and his wife. And I have a couple sentences to describe what they're like, and I want to bring it full front and center. They're vibrant, and then they shuffle off in their, pink taffeta or whatever. And like, so yeah, with this book specifically, I was focusing on those like punchy little descriptions of people, locations and stuff, and really trying to make them as vibrant as I could in fewer words, which was a great challenge as a writer. I learned so much writing this book, because it was something very different from anything I've written before. So I don't know if that answers your question.
I want to add something that I keep forgetting to highlight about this book, that I loved, a detail about this book, that despite the episodic nature, I really appreciated that when Addie went through certain injuries, they carried through. It wasn't like she got injured and you as a writer forgot she was injured and just carried on. It's like broken ribs. I cannot tell you how many times I have read books where the character breaks a rib and it's like, oh wow, I guess broken ribs don't hurt. Like I guess they just ignore that a day later. I don't know. Like, so I did appreciate that, like I said, even though we are having different kinds of episodic adventures along the way, there was a through line there. I did appreciate that quite a bit. I know that's a detail, but it's an important detail, in my opinion.
It is. I mean, my grandfather broke ribs, and he explained in detail what that is like. I've bruised ribs before, and I know how bad that is. So I can't even imagine like breaking them. So that was a big one where I was like, no, this takes a while.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say that like there was 20 pages, Tori, where I was worried in your novel, and it was about I think it was about 60 pages from the end, where we were kind of getting this episodic, and I'm like, great, this is wonderful. I love episodic. I'm like, is there going to be a finale? Is all of this going to come together, or are we kind of coming off and then we'll get to the next book? But I think the coming of it all together in the final 40-50 pages was really great. And then going back and seeing how each of these chunks kind of fit into this larger puzzle with the gallows sequence and things like that. I thought you brought it together really well towards the end.
Thank you. Yeah, the ending was important for me to get right. And even though it is a first book in a series, which that's one of my soapbox things, is that you don't have to give your readers everything in the first book. But I wanted it to be enough of this is a big deal and this is a big moment for Hunter. And I also ascribe to the school of thought that you don't withhold all of the big things from your readers until the end. So that gallows scene was really important to me to showcase from the beginning, when Hunter's walking through the town and everybody's like side-eyeing and moving to the other side of the street. Like, we need a culmination of that in this first book to show that Hunter feeling like an outcast is warranted, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to bring this up, that I had a theory about Rip. Do you mind if I bring that up, that we talked
Please,
about?
go ahead.
Yeah. So I had this theory about Rip, that maybe Rip, I was wondering, who was Rip? Who was he? And my theory when I was reading the book, though I think there was a line towards the end. I'm like, well, I'm probably wrong about that. But that is that Rip was possibly Hunter's father. And the reason I thought that was because she constantly refers to her father and her mother, but we don't know exactly what happened to her father. She's not really willing to talk about it, but we know that there's a gravesite for her mother, but we don't hear mention of a gravesite for her father. So anyway, do you want to give the answer you gave me as to my theory? I love your
yeah, and
answer
I
to this.
asked you before, when you asked or said that, I was like, so do you want me to confirm or deny this theory, or just let you
love
go
your
until we
answer,
get
though.
further in the series?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember what I said exactly now.
Do you want me to tell
Not
you
her.
what you said?
Yeah, please.
So I'm slight spoilers, I guess, moving forward. But what you said is that Rip is not her father,
No,
but you're not far off.
correct.
That's what you said.
Yes.
So now I'm more
Yes,
curious.
which is, I'm sure, delightfully vague and frustrating.
No, it was the perfect answer. It was the perfect answer. Yeah.
You're not. Yeah, you're warm, ironically. But yeah, no, he's not her father.
Yeah.
The scene I was alluding to earlier about Rip and Hunter that I enjoyed is, I think it's in the cathedrals, where she just walks up at one point and out of pure frustration and almost an attempt at catharsis that isn't quite there. It stabs him, right? She doesn't shoot him. She stabs him, walks up to him, and literally, I love their, and I don't know how to describe their interplay, because it's not interplay. Oh, very rarely is it, them having a back and forth.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to that idea of tethering and trauma and releasing yourself and not allowing yourself release.
And also, there's a motif in this story of mirrors, right? Where Rip represents something to Hunter within herself that she does not love. She hates, and she's angry at, yes, Rip, but also she's really harboring that anger toward herself. And so when she's, in that cave and she's attacking Rip, who's she really attacking? And there's that question of like, there's a bit of both there for sure.
Yes. Especially because we know that a piece of her soul is in Rip, right?
Right. Exactly. That's what's animating him, right? Is a piece of her. So is he more who he was before, or is he more Hunter? And that, I think, is a question that, as we go throughout the series, I'm really excited to explore that more.
Oh, I'm so curious of where this is going now, because there's so much to be said about so yeah, something that kept coming up in my thoughts when I was reading it was like, it's called Cold Silver for Souls. I know that she's a bounty hunter, but I feel like, I felt I kept on thinking of that line, that saying, the cliche saying of not all souls are lost, not all souls are lost.
Right.
And I felt like part of her just feels like, this is it for me. I can't, this is who I am, and I'm confined to this. Whereas I think Ambrose is the voice that's saying, this is not it for you. There is more to life.
You're worth more. Yeah.
And there are other possibilities out there. And she doesn't quite see those possibilities for herself. And oh my gosh, that kind of theme I really love. And I also think it's powerful, the line where she talks about, I think it was like with Johnny maybe, or when she feels naked without her guns, and how like Johnny hasn't quite gotten there and he will. And just seeing that represented to her, thinking about the mirror there. And also even just the silver blades that she carries too, how vulnerable she feels without them. But the more I think about being in that world, I'm like, I would feel vulnerable without those things too. So
same. I made it and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, I could understand that. Yeah.
You talk about
Definitely.
writing on. Is there a solid game plan about where you're heading and kind of number of texts? And have you spoken about that? Are you at liberty to
Sure.
talk about how far it's going? Yeah.
Yeah, so between 4 and 6 books at this point, probably 4 or 5, I'm guessing. The book where we get the full backstory of who Rip is and his connection with Hunter and all of that. I can even tell you the title of it if you would like to know. That might be a good little tease for that. So I'm going to try and incorporate silver, obviously, in every single title, and the book where we delve a little bit into Hunter's past and who Rip is called 30 Pieces of Silver.
Oh, nice. Yep.
And I'm really excited to write that one. It's probably going to be book 3. Because book 2, we're going to go south. You're going to meet Miles Lightfellow, which I'm very excited about. I think he's going to be a fun character to write. He's a dumpster fire of a character, and I already enjoy writing him. And his relationship with Hunter also, I think, is going to be a very interesting dynamic to explore, because it's the kind of relationship where they often cannot stand each other, but they trust each other implicitly with their lives. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I think that's also a really interesting relationship to explore. And poor Johnny, it's like he's out here with his 2 like completely like these are kind of his faux parents now, and he's just, doomed. But yeah, that's going to be really fun. And I do have the final climactic scene in my head already, and I think it's going to be it's really powerful for me, and I really hope that translates to the readers as well after they've spent this time with Hunter and Rip and the crew. So yeah.
Have you started writing it? My understanding was that you were going to go back to your other Bloodstone series first.
Yep, I am. So I'm currently working on the next installment of Legends of the Bruhai. And what I love about these 2 series is they're a perfect back and forth kind of for each other. So if my brain is really tired for Legends of the Bruhai and I need to jump back with a very familiar, easy character who's that episodic kind of, it's just a very different brain pattern, if that makes sense. So I'm looking forward to I have started book 2 already, in the conversation that happens right after the epilogue of book 1, where we get Miles and Hunter banter right away. Yeah, I'm excited about that, and I think
I knew it was going to be Miles. By the way, when we got to that end, I was like, I bet the character they're going to see is Miles. I don't know why. I was like, because I think it was signaled. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I don't want Johnny to meet Miles Lightfellow, so clearly we're going to meet Miles Lightfellow. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think again too, like Johnny brings out better aspects of Hunter, because that's the kind of character he is, and I think it's going to be fun to play with that against Miles as well, where Hunter and Johnny are kind of like, to me, that's another mirror moment, right, where what Hunter sees in Johnny is a younger version of herself.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Yeah.
There's a lot of protectiveness there on trying to give him a better experience than the one she had. And I always think about, in trauma therapy, one of the things that comes up sometimes is to be the adult that your younger self needed. And I think Hunter's trying to do that in her own flawed way. And that might trigger some things in Miles as well. So we'll see what happens there. But
I think one of my favorite moments in the book, I like Johnny a lot. I liked how he named his horse General. Is it General? And then she's like,
yeah,
really?
I love that bit.
Johnny's like, oh,
yeah.
I love him so much.
And she could tell she let him down with her reaction. But then also there's that moment when he comes up with her on her unexpectedly, and she lashes out at him, and then she realizes in her mind, she's like, I messed up. And they slowly have to work through that. And I love seeing that progression of them having to work through these moments that are less than human, that are going to happen when you're traveling with somebody and you're tired. And just so much of that guarding that Addie has to work through. Hunter has to work through. I thought that was so well handled. And I just love that reflection. I'm like, oh, I've done that before, where I've lashed out and thought, oh my gosh, I didn't mean it. I can't believe I did that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So really
And
great.
we'll get more of the specifics of like what was triggering Hunter in that moment and what she's trying to hide, and the kind of origin of some of her physical scars, probably in book 2. So yeah.
Yeah.
Some,
Cool.
more stuff involving and Rip, I'm sure. I'm trying to think what the worst reveal. We've had a very close guess to who Rip is, but I'm trying to think what's the worst possible reveal for Rip. And I'm just thinking it could be another YouTuber. Just
You auditioning, David? No, just kidding.
So funny.
It's David. No.
I'm curious though, like when you asked us about our favorite character, is there anything that came to mind as far as like you associate with people associating with a certain character, or was it any thought about that?
Interesting.
Or just curious
Good
about it?
question. That's one of my favorite questions, just because I'm such a like character nerd, you guys. You have no idea. And so it's always fun to me to see which characters resonate with which people. Joanna, you didn't surprise me at all with Johnny. I can and I love him. So it always, and I love all my characters. So it makes me happy whenever somebody gets a point, like they've got a fan. So, David saying Addie, that makes me all excited because I love Addie. I loved writing her. I literally could not wait to get to the part in the story where she came in so I could write her character. I loved writing her. Johnny is a very near and dear character to my heart. He's the kind of character that I think I love how protective readers feel of him immediately. And how I think he represents in some way for a lot of us, like a part of ourselves that we want to protect, that kind of still looks at this harsh, angry world with some kind of innocence and joy, and not even joy, but just acceptance. Like he just kind of, and despite everything he's been through, he still has a hard time seeing the worst in people. And I think that's something that's a really beautiful gift. And as a parent myself, something that I watch every day in my own children that I try really hard to protect as much as I can. Johnny is actually based on one of my favorite fictional characters. He was kind of a starting point for me to jump off of. And I know, have you guys both seen The Outsiders, originally written as a book by S.E. Hinton?
Yes.
I haven't. No, I've heard great things about it, but yeah.
Such a good film. Johnny Cade is one of my favorite fictional characters of all time. And Johnny in Cold Silver was kind of loosely based on, I kind of started there and I was like, okay, I'm going to throw him into this world. And how do I change that and kind of add, some stuff with how he's going to be with Hunter and make him a necromancer. Yeah, so he was kind of a nod in that way to a character that's meant a lot to me over the years. So yeah.
S.E. Hinton wrote that novel when she was like 16 or
16.
something as well. Enviously young.
I know.
That's
brilliant.
wild.
Absolutely brilliant.
I've heard great things. I need to pick it up at some point. Yeah.
You've not read the novel either, Joanna?
No.
It's worth it.
It's so good.
It's like 200 pages as well. Like it's
very
worth
fast.
it. It's taught widely. I don't know about the US, but certainly in the UK, and it deserves.
Isn't it? I mean, am I wrong about this? Isn't it like one of the first young adult novels or something along those lines? I could be wrong about that. But I thought that was the one that's usually referenced.
Yeah, it's definitely high up there in the reading list. I think it was written in the 60s, I believe, 60s or 70s. And the film, in my opinion, is one of the best film adaptations to a novel that I've ever seen. It's really well done.
Nice.
A lot of big names in it too, that were much younger at the time, but yeah.
That's cool.
Did you read it in school or afterwards?
No, I saw the film when I was in high school, and it was one of my favorite films from the moment I saw it. And then I actually didn't read the book until I think a year or two ago. And did not disappoint at all. Yeah. It was an amazing experience. So yeah, highly recommend. I actually bought all of her other books because I want to do an S.E. Hinton reading vlog at some point and just read all of her books and talk about them. Yeah.
As an English teacher, I probably shouldn't say this, but there are some books you shouldn't read in school, not because they're not quality, but because then it becomes homework. It becomes vegetables.
Yeah, totally agree.
I'm really glad that I read it after coming out of high school. Same with Lord of the Flies. I'm glad I didn't read it in school because I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much as having just read it independently. Yeah. I know we're wrapping up, but I was wondering if either of you have any comments, questions from the authorial perspective or from the reader's perspective as we kind of enter the last few minutes here.
I don't. I just want to say congratulations, Tori. And I'm really
Yeah.
happy to be here and celebrate Cold Silver for Souls. And yeah, I'm just happy to have this discussion with you. So thank you.
Yeah.
I'd echo what you said, Joanna. Real pleasure to read, and real pleasure to have you on, Tori.
Yeah, thank you so much, you guys. One of the, as from an authorial point of view, one of the most rewarding things is to have discussions with readers and to see what sort of things that they resonate with within the book. Sometimes it's stuff that I didn't even like. It was a smaller thing for me, but it might be a really big deal or resonate really strongly with someone else. And I love seeing what other people pull from the characters in the story. Because that it's kind of a collaborative art form in that way, that once I've written it and it's out in the world and other people can have their own experience with it. I love seeing it take on its own kind of life as it's being added to by all the people that read it. So yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to chat more about it.
I think that's going to come out even more fully if this audio production comes through, and another layer to that.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, community interaction might be a way of
That
putting
is so
it.
exciting. Yeah.
I've got a few people signed on already for certain characters, and like I won't say who it is yet because I want to reveal later, but there was one person that I would have let play Ambrose, and he said yes. So I'm very excited about that.
And when I'm in the future revealed to be Rip, then you can let me jump in and do that voice too. So
you can cool. Absolutely. I will list you as the voice actor for Rip, 100%.
Right. Well, to both of you, thank you very much. And thank you so much for watching. And see you in the next video, guys. Bye.
Bye, everybody.